It takes a special kind of unfortunate to lose 5 games in an NFL season where you lead by 7+ points at the half, but by God, the Raiders found a way to do it in 2022. They were the only team ever in the history of the sport to do that.
That is not a great stat to have pinned on your franchise, but in a lot of ways, it feels like it sums up their 2022 season.
They were arguably the most snake-bitten team in the league, not necessarily in terms of injuries. I mean, we talked about the Broncos yesterday. They were by far the most injured team in the league in terms of like cumulative starts lost. But the Raiders, A, also had their fair share of injuries, but B, just could not get out of their own way, even with the guys they had on the field. Blown second half leads all over the place. There was the Derek Carr situationship that went south. It was a mess at the end. You know, Waller's gone, Carr's gone. Devontae is still there, but this is not the team that Devontae signed up for. Then we got Jimmy G's coming in, and you know, it fails the physical, and so they have to redo the contract at the last second, and we're not even sure if he's going to play. And so now it's, hey, maybe Aiden O'Connell is going to be starting sooner rather than later, which, by the way, not as bad idea as I think people think it is. Like, Aiden O'Connell's actually pretty darn good. I would be okay with that. But there's a lot of uncertainty with the Raiders.
They did not have a great 2022, and we've talked about teams in this series already that had holes in 2022, realized what those holes were, had an orderly approach to patch them through free agency, coaching changes, the draft, and as a result, are looking solidly better in 2023. The Raiders aren't that team.
They have good pieces that they added, but we just, in terms of how everything's coming together, especially at the most important position, we just don't know yet. Like, I'm not definitively ready to say they're bad. I'm not definitively ready to say they're good. They are a mystery wrapped in an enigma, and I don't think we're going to really figure them out until like Halloween.
No, the approach has been, let's say, somewhat haphazard. It's not been an orderly offseason for the Raiders, and we're not here to make proclamations about they're good or they're bad. We're going to tell you all the things that they did and go from there, starting with the things they did in 2022 as a summary. Overall record, 6-11, third in the division, 4-4 at home, which is fine. Road record, 2-7. Couldn't get it done away from Allegiant. Last 5 games, they slid to the finish 1-4. So, all of that said, it leads into the effectiveness summary, which is a new thing for us this year. If you've been watching the series, you're familiar with it. If not, we're taking the basis of whether or not a football team is good, basing it on EPA per play, talking about EPA per play for rushing and passing on the offensive side, for stopping the run and stopping the pass on the defensive side, and then talking about how many points they scored and how many points they allowed. So we get 6 overall numbers, and we take their league ranks. So we're comparing them to the rest of their peers and how effective they were or were not at doing those things. Starting off with the rushing offense, the Raiders were 19th. Mm-hmm. That's okay. It's not terrible. I know it doesn't sound great, but it's just lower than mid-pack in terms of being in the exact middle, and rushing offense isn't necessarily the thing that's going to win you championships these days.
I mean, they had the league leading rusher, and they were still 19th in EPA, which tells you that they were...
it was a volume-based offense.
It's not even that. It's more so like when you often see rushing attacks that are productive in terms of like total yards, but not great in terms of EPA, it means it was streaky, right? It means that it was nothing, huge play. And when you watch Josh Jacobs, I mean, God, he was fighting for his life behind that offensive line. Yeah. And he really made the most of it. But at the same time, production-wise, a lot of the times it was nothing. Jacobs breaks like 3 tackles and takes on the defense by himself and gets like 20 yards. And, you know, that's where you start to see the spikes in EPA. But, man, they were giving him nothing to work with for a big part of the year, largely because of offensive line injuries, and then they weren't using Parham at the right spot. Anyway, we'll get to the offensive line later, but it was kind of a mess.
Following on the passing offense, the league rank for them was 12th, which in putting these numbers together was surprising to me. I would have put them lower than that based on watching that offensive attack on tape. 12th is certainly a good enough number to win in the NFL in terms of a league rank. Now, as we slip to the defensive side, rushing defense, EPA per play against 20th. Again, it's okay. It'll get you off the field in most situations, but not all. It's not a death knell. You could live with that ranking. However, when we get to the pass defense, 31st. Folks, you can't live with that in the modern NFL.
Nope.
If you are second to last in the NFL at defending the pass, you're going to get boat raced by a lot of people. And the Raiders did. That's why they gave up a lot of those second half leads. As far as points scored, 395 points scored. This was a productive offense. That's 12th in the league. That is enough to be a good team, to be a playoff contender, to win your division, all of those things. So McDaniels was able to orchestrate an offense despite all the issues we've talked about that was almost top 10 in scoring. That's really good. Points allowed, other end of the spectrum, 26th. Down near the bottom of the league. They couldn't stop people from scoring. This defense was not cohesive last year, did suffer from some injuries, but couldn't hold on in the second half. That leads to the stat you led off with. So as you look at those, 19th, 12th, 20th, 31st, 12th, 26th. Not really overwhelming and trending towards the bottom half. We take those 6 numbers, add them together, divide by 6. We come up with a number we call the Bootleg power score. It's 20. Lower the score, the better. You want to be number 1 because, again, these are based on league ranks. Nobody's going to be number 1 because that would mean you led every category. Nobody did that. But you want to be closer to the top. Lower score is better, just like golf. 20th puts them down towards the bottom third of the league, which is what we saw on tape. So their power score is reflective of how they played in 2022.
I looked it up because I was curious, despite being 12th in points scored, I was like, okay, but where did they score from? This was a team that kind of lived or died, mostly died, by explosive plays. They were 24th in red zone appearances, and they were 26th in terms of red zone touchdown percentage, meaning how often do they score touchdowns when they make the red zone. Like, they were 12 spots behind Denver in terms of red zone efficiency. And they just didn't get to the red zone that much either. But they filled in the gaps by scoring from 30, 40 yards
way
out,
downtown.
Right? So it was very much a streaky offense, which also kind of explains why they couldn't put people away. Because at some point, if those big plays dry up and you have nothing else to fall back on and you can't sustain drives because, again, your rushing game is streaky and inconsistent, and your red zone offense is streaky and inconsistent. Either it works or it doesn't, right? There's no consistency. There's no backbone to kind of build your team off of.
You can't grind it out.
It was just hot and cold, which it feels like it's been the Raiders for a while, like hot and cold, but like they amped it up to 11 last year. And it was really frustrating. It was absolutely frustrating. By the way, I mentioned the misusing Parham. I remember I was doing some research on this a while back when I was doing pre-draft work on the Raiders, and because you and I both loved Dylan Parham when he was coming out, right?
Yeah.
He was a right guard at Memphis. They played him at left guard, but he was a right guard at Memphis. He gave up pretty much no pressures at all at Memphis. He gave up 2 quarterback hits the entire season his last year in college, right? Goes to the Raiders. They make him play left guard for most of his rookie year. At left guard, in 15 games, he gave up 57 pressures. They let him play right guard, his natural spot, for 2 games. He gave up 2 pressures.
He's one of those guys that has, he's handed, for lack of a better term, right-handed or left-handed. He is right-handed. He plays on the right side, and some guys will tell you it's not a big deal. They feel ambidextrous. Chandler Zavala said, "I don't care. I can play left. I can play right." Some guys
got to be
are
like, right side.
"I don't care what side, or I don't care what position you put me in, but keep me on the same side so I can keep my footwork the same. My kick step starts with the same side, my reach starts with the same side, and when they get swapped, it just doesn't translate." That right there feels like Parham is a right side guy, period, end of story.
But they kept putting him at left. And it sounds like they're going to keep doing it this year and have Bars be right and try Dylan Parham at left again. And maybe eventually it'll catch on. But I'm like, God, like we made Carr run for his life and we made Jacobs fight for his life on every carry when we could have just put him at right guard.
Yeah, and this is a highly drafted player.
Yes.
Right? This is someone you've invested in. And if he gives you tremendous returns on one side and you are stubbornly trying to force a square peg into a round hole, for Alex Bars of all people, Bears legend, Alex Bars.
Yeah, okay.
Right? But Bars has experience on both sides and in the middle. He played center as well. He can play any of the interior spots. It feels like, move that guy. He was a UDFA out of Notre Dame. And you're taking a highly drafted player from Memphis who has excelled on the right side and saying, no, you're going to be left. We're going to make you left. He's like, I gave up 57 pressures. You want me to do it again? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, you already gave the bootleg power score number, right?
I did.
Yeah. So at 20, again, emphasizing, that doesn't mean they were ranked 20th.
No, it's
in
not
power
20th.
score.
It's just 20, a number.
And it's interesting. Their raw score was a flat number. Not often do we see a flat number for the raw score, which also might contribute to people being confused about it. But if we're looking at where that falls in terms of raw scores, it would be actually tied for like 26 with the Titans. So again, when we get to the end of the series and we show all of the raw scores, you'll see where that falls. But there was only two teams that averaged out to 20, and it was the Raiders and the Titans, and both had pretty rough 2022s. Looking at some schematic stats, the types of coverages they ran, the amounts of blitzes that they called, the types of runs they called, and also how their passing game is structured. This is going to kind of give more context to the EPA. And with the carryover in the staff this year, also might give context for this year too. We'll start with defense, which was a problem last year. The coverages that Patrick Graham, called for the most part were cover one. They were 7th in cover one. They loved their single high man coverage. They were about average in cover 2 at 14th. They were about average in cover 3 at 15th. They were 22nd in quarters. Didn't play it a whole lot, which is interesting because he played it a lot more when he was in New York. Kind of got away from it here. Quarter, half, they were 22nd. They were not one of those teams that loved quarter, half, which is good because not every team's good at running it. And then 2-man or cover 5, if you speak Sabanese, they were about average there. So they were mostly right down the middle of the fairway. Where they ticked up a little bit more was 0. They called quite a bit of 0 relative to the rest of the league. They were 8th at about 3%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for cover 0, that's quite a bit. What's interesting, though, is on second downs, in particular, where they were a more blitz-heavy team in general, they called the 5th most cover 0 at over 3, about 3.5%.
Yeah.
That kind of ties into their overall blitz numbers, because this was not a team, relative to what we've seen from Patrick Graham in the past, this was not a team that blitzed a whole lot.
Yeah.
Their overall blitz percentage, period, was dead average, 16th in the league, 30.6%. Their blitz percentage on second downs was 37.2%. They blitzed more on second down than third down, like by a pretty significant margin. Like third and long, they were at 25%, which is 24th in the league. So when they brought pressure, it was mostly to try to get negative plays to force you into third and long so they could sit back and cover, right? It's an interesting approach.
Sure.
Because not a lot of defenses bring pressure on second down rather than third down. There's the Lions where they're blitzing like almost every fucking play on third and long. But then there's the Raiders that do that for second down. So I kind of want to do more film work on this defense to figure out what types of pressures they brought. I don't have those in front of me because I want to see where they bring in linebackers, where they bring in nickels. Was it, hey, we have like an auto check where if we get our boundary corner coming, if the receiver goes in motion, like some guys have that. So I got to see exactly what pressures they were calling, but I just found it fascinating that as a team that didn't blitz a lot, they saved it almost entirely for second down.
Yeah, they shoved that earlier in the series to try and force people's hands. And Graham is an aggressive defensive coordinator. It's interesting that he took that aggression and didn't wait for what's a more typical down to blitz on 3rd and long and said, instead, we're going to try and get you into that 3rd and long so that we can drop more guys in coverage, blitz less by doing it on 1st and especially 2nd down.
By the way, their stunt percentage was 27th. This was not a team that called a whole lot of stunts. And again, we're talking about 3rd down, which they also weren't a team that blitzed a lot, so that kind of goes hand in hand. I really want to see what they do this year with now that they have Tyree Wilson. And if he's healthy, which we love Tyree Wilson if he's healthy, him plus Max plus hopefully Chandler's back to being at least 80% of what Chandler was. Plus the interior guys they got. Like maybe they won't have to blitz a whole lot and their front four is just going to tear faces off. But I'm curious to see if they kind of keep that approach going in 2023 of early down pressure over late down pressure. Flipping over to the offense, we'll start with run concept frequency. They were not a heavy inside zone team, only called about 8%, which you would think for having like a big back like Josh Jacobs that they would have called more inside zone, kind of a more north-south type concept. Nope, they really more leaned into power, they leaned into counter, and they leaned into duo. Now, there are some offensive line aficionados that are like, duo and inside zone are basically the same thing. You're correct. I mean, you're wrong, but you're correct. They hit similarly. The tracks are similar. The running backs are doing similar things. It's 6 of one, half dozen the other. I get it. But in terms of just how it's charted, they were mostly a man blocking run scheme with duo, power, and counter. Something I found super fascinating. They called more draw than anybody else. 11% draw. That's like unheard of relative to the rest of the league. I think number 2 was like 8% or something like that. But they don't have a mobile quarterback. And a lot of the top draw teams are the ones with quarterbacks because they call quarterback draw.
Yeah.
Raiders didn't do that. It was halfback draw. It was with Jacobs, right? And so I did some work on that, and I was like, why did they call so much draw? Like, what were the situations where they did that? And I found that it was mostly on 1st and 2nd down against middle field open looks, meaning too high safety looks, right? And it felt like it was almost like a game plan specific auto check. Of like, if we get middle field open pre-snap on early downs, meaning safeties out of the box, or even if it's quarters, which means the safeties are in the fit, they're still going to be pretty far away, right? So we can hit them. But 41 of their 45 draw calls were on 1st or 2nd down, and 36 of those were against too high safety looks. And so I kind of feel like a lot of those draws came from Carr getting the line of scrimmage, seeing where the safeties were, checking into it and saying, Josh, go get me 7 yards. And it worked a lot. Like they were very effective with it. But they were the only team in the NFL doing that. And because they were effective at it, I want to see if anybody else in the NFL does that this year. With the proliferation of all these too high looks around the league, if draw all of a sudden becomes a viable early down run call, it could change how a lot of offenses around the league function.
It's a way to punish a defense out of what they want to do. And with the proliferation that we talked about a lot last year in this series to, hey, single high safety looks are going away in terms of percentage. They're still used a lot in early downs when people are expecting you to run, but with pass frequency going up on early downs, with folks not wanting KC's offense from 3 years ago to tear them to pieces, like too high safeties, and those safeties in that fit have to what we call run the alley, right? They have to come from depth, pin their ears back, and fill close to the line and run fit, but they're 12 yards away at best, usually 15. So you need safeties who can come downhill and fill the run if you're going to play those looks. And if you see that and say, hey, they can't get there before we get 5 or 6, and 5 or 6 on first down,
They'll take it.
A fairly easy call. I mean, draw is a very basic play. Your kid's elementary team probably runs draw. Why not, right? And if you can do that and get the defense to adjust, hey, on first and second down, they're crushing us with draw. We're giving up 5 and 6 yards. It's giving us second and short. Yeah.
It was just about one of the only things that was consistently good for the Raiders offense last year were those draw calls. Flipping over to the passing side, this is where things got sketchy, and also kind of backing up some of what we talked about earlier. They were a little below average play action team, about 18th in the league, 25.9%. Average time to throw, 6th slowest. I want to do more film work on that because they were not super leaning into play action, and also because Carr isn't like the most mobile guy. Like, I understand when I was just kind of doing cursory film work during the season, there was a lot of times where I was like, Derek, throw it, please fucking throw it. Oh my God, oh, okay, you got hit. Like, There were a lot of those, but I kind of wonder if there were so many of those that it dropped his average time to throw down in a bad way. Like, there's a lot of teams that are quote unquote slow in average time to throw where we can kind of explain it away of like, oh, Justin Fields, he runs around a lot, or
sure.
Oh, it's a heavy play action team. They're naturally longer developing plays. But with the Raiders, it's like not a super mobile quarterback, and also not a heavy play action team. That kind of leaves the one option of Derek Carr not throwing the ball super quick.
Let it go, man.
So again, I kind of want to back that up with film study as we get closer to the season. Not that it like affects the Raiders at all. It's more so when we get to the Saints episode. I want to have that done by the time we get to the Saints episode. Air yards percentage. We talked about them kind of being an all or nothing offense. You know, where they scored from. 55.3% of their passing yardage came through the air rather than after the catch. That was 12th highest in the NFL. Average depth of target 9.9, tied for 4th highest in the NFL. Checks out. Big time throw percentage, roughly average at 3.7%. Yards per attempt, 7.9, 8th in the NFL. So again, this was a bomb it and pray offense. And when it worked, boy, it was pretty. Yeah. When it didn't work, they blew a historic amount of second half leads.
It feels like an older Raiders team, like a much older, almost AFL Raiders team, right?
Oh, Al Davis would have loved it.
Yeah, Daryl and Monica, right? Let this thing go, get chunks. And if you have the receiving core and the quarterback and the protection to make that work, it's an exciting brand of football. If it doesn't connect, you're basically a 3-point shooting basketball team that can't hit threes.
Yes.
And you end up losing some games you probably should win because you don't have the pivot to say, okay, look, the long game's not working for us today. We need to go to the things that are more efficient, grind some yards out, make some points, maybe kick some field goals, you know, sort of keep the momentum. And momentum wasn't really a thing for them. It was, like you've said, streaky, hot and cold, hit or miss. When they were on, it was great. When they weren't, they didn't really have a counterpunch.
Turning our attention to the power structure at B, you know, we talked a little bit about Patrick Graham. We've mentioned Josh McDaniels a few times. I am willing to give this another year. You know, early returns were a little bit disappointing. I'm willing to see what they got for 2023. But is it safe to say that even as a second-year group, that they're somewhat on thin ice already?
It's not a very cold seat, but it is not a hot seat yet. It is impossible to judge draft classes before really 2, I would say, probably 3 years. And Dave Ziegler, the GM, in year 2, we like the look of this year's draft class. Free agency is a little bit different. I feel like a lot of times when we say we like a GM, we like what they're doing in free agency and we see how it meshes very well with the draft. Whether or not we agreed with the draft, we at least see that, oh, they patched this hole here and then they pushed that next need off to the draft. With the current power structure with the Raiders, it feels like the draft has been decent for the last 2 years and free agency has been a bit up and down.
It felt like the the Jimmy G thing was panicky. And I don't know if that's Ziegler's fault. I don't know if it's McDaniel's fault. I don't know if it's Mark Davis's fault. I really don't know where the Carr thing came from. And I'm sure there's Raiders fans that will be in the comments that will give us more context than we could get, because these are the nitty-gritty things, the interpersonal politics of individual franchises that sometimes EJ and I don't have really the time to dig into. So if you're a Raiders fan and you can give us context on who pulled the trigger on that, please do. But it felt messy, and it felt like rushed almost, and it kind of felt like they benched Carr when they did because they just didn't want him to get hurt because they wanted to trade him, and then he said, fuck you guys, cut me, and they didn't really have any recourse, right? And then, obviously there's the Tom Brady elephant in the room. Like, clearly they thought they were going to get Tom, which we had heard that they thought they were going to get Tom, and then Tom was like, no, I'm retiring, and they're like, fuck, okay.
Now what?
Derek come back, and he's like, no, cut me. And so then it's like, okay, Jimmy, come save us.
You're familiar with the system. You worked with our head coach, who was then the offensive coordinator in New England before you went to San Francisco. Like, can you sub?
It just felt like none of this was plan A or plan B or plan C. And they lucked into Aiden O'Connell, who we did interview at the Shrine Bowl. He's a great dude, smart player. I think, honestly, he's going to be good for them. And they got lucky that he was there when he was. He's probably going to start games for them this year. But, like, if they didn't get Aiden, you're staring down the barrel of maybe starting Brian Hoyer.
But even if you did get Aiden, who we interviewed and really enjoyed, great dude, love his attitude, think he'll be a decent player. But if you are staring at the rest of your division, and winning division games is the way you get yourself into the playoffs. If you are staring at division games and Aiden O'Connell is your plan in the AFC West, as a rookie, all rookie quarterbacks struggle. Aiden wasn't super highly drafted for several reasons. He's a good player. If you're saying he's our answer to the guy over there that plays in red, that's not a good plan.
No.
So when you talk about process, we talk about the GM, we talk about the roster structure, it's impossible to ignore the quarterback spot. You have to have it solidified. You have to have a plan. It doesn't always work out. We saw it happen to the Colts when Andrew Luck retired. Like, these things happen. It didn't go their way. Plan B didn't go their way. Plan C still didn't go their way. Now they're looking at plan D or E to start the season. That's rough. So when we say free agency didn't feel really meshed with the rest of the strategy, you can look at the draft class, which we think is good, and go, well, great, but what are you going to do about the game's most important position?
Yeah.
And that just sort of casts a shadow over the rest of this. We've talked about Josh McDaniels, coordinators, Mick Lombardi, offensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, we've mentioned, defensive coordinator. We like his work. It'll be interesting to see how he shifts with some of the new personnel. Tom McMahon's the special teams coordinator. Other notable coaches on offense. Edgar Bennett is the wide receivers coach.
He's on that staff?
Uh-huh.
Hold on. Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Bears receiver?
Running back. Bears and Packers running back, one of the few players that's played on both sides of that rivalry. Yes, that Edgar Bennett.
Huh. How about that?
Yeah. So between he's been with the Raiders for 5 years. He played 8 seasons for the Packers and Bears combined, again, jumping to either side of the volatile rivalry that it was when he played for them. But he is in charge of their wide receiver corps. So this is Devontae's coach. Scott Turner is their pass game coordinator. He's got 11 years of NFL experience, and he is the son of former NFL head coach and longtime offensive coordinator Norv Turner. So that's who's running their passing offense. On defense, very familiar name. Rob Ryan is now a senior defensive assistant. 33 years of NFL experience. Josh McDaniels brings him on to be the sort of catch-all overseer on defense, help Patrick Graham wherever he needs it.
Please help us blitz better. That's basically what he's doing.
Pretty much. Antonio Pierce is the linebackers coach. 10 years of coaching experience already. First season with the Raiders was with Arizona State for the past 5 years. Played as an NFL player. Many people will recognize him as a longtime linebacker for the Giants and others. And then Jason Simon is the DB and pass game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator. First year with Las Vegas after being with Carolina last year. 10-year NFL career as a player. So a bunch of former players, bunch of long tenured coaches, folks that come from coaching long lines of, coaching family trees. A pretty interesting mix on McDaniel's staff. Now, it didn't necessarily all mix well last year, just because you have a lot of experience and folks from, again, coaching lineage and player side. It all sounds good on paper. We'll have to see how that translates in really what is the second year of trying to mesh this all together.
One of my earliest football memories was when Edgar Bennett was on those 90s Packers teams with Favre, like 96, I think was when they went to the Super Bowl, right? Something like that.
Something like that. You asking me when the Packers went to the Super Bowl?
I know.
I don't care.
Sacrilege.
I don't care. And Jason Simmons is the defensive back and defensive pass game coordinator. It's his first year with Las Vegas after being with Carolina last year. 10-year career as an NFL player. So lots of mix of experience, folks that come from long coaching trees and coaching family lineage, former players. It sounds like a very experienced mix, is a very experienced mix, but didn't all necessarily mesh super well last year in Las Vegas. So it'll be interesting to see with another year under the belt if they all sort of start pulling in the same direction on the same page, or if there's still a little bit of that disjointed feel to it.
Given that unfortunate disjointedness and the carryover from the staff from last year to this year, so we expect a lot of things to be similar. Well, hopefully not everything to be similar, but we expect a lot of things to be similar with some turnover in talent, but still largely the same general structure in place. I think there's a lot of people that are wondering, okay, who will be featured this year? What are we going to see on the field, particularly on offense? And I think there's two scenarios here, whether it's Jimmy G's team or whether it's Aiden O'Connell's team. I'm not taking Brian Hoyer seriously. He's not starting games, right? If Brian Hoyer is starting over Aiden O'Connell, there's a fucking problem. Like, we know what Brian Hoyer is. There's If Hoyer's starting, it's because they want Caleb Williams. Right. Like that's the plan. But I think there's two scenarios, right? It's the Jimmy G scenario and the Aiden O'Connell scenario. In the event of Jimmy G somehow getting healthy, break a lot. If he's week one and he survives the year, the offense that I expect is going to be very, very run heavy. And when we did the 49ers episode, we kind of illustrated like the years that Jimmy was healthy. It was very run heavy, very play action heavy. And when Jimmy was out, it was less so with the 49ers. Expect the same kind of thing. He thrives on hand the ball off a shitload, rely on play action to suck linebackers up to open up the middle of the field. So that's where we're going to get a lot of Jacoby Myers. Yep. We're going to get a lot of Hunter Renfrow over the middle. Less so Devontae Adams. Devontae will still be the number one, but Jimmy doesn't throw deep outside the numbers. So Devontae, if he's going to get fed, they would have to put him in the slot. Like I don't anticipate him getting as much work as we're used to if Jimmy's the quarterback. If Aiden O'Connell's the quarterback, now it's the Devontae Adams show. Aiden will air it out down the field. There were some wow throws that he had at Purdue. He has no qualms about throwing deep outside the numbers. I think if you're trying to figure out which Raiders weapons to draft, or rather which ones to draft at a value, pay close attention to the quarterback situation. In particular, pay close attention to Jimmy G's foot.
Yes.
If Jimmy's on the field, fade Devontae. He's going as wide receiver 9 right now. I don't see him living up to that with Garoppolo as his quarterback. If Jimmy's not on the field, I'm pulling the trigger on Devontae at wide receiver 9 because to be honest, he's going to go after wide receiver 9 because people are going to be scared of Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah.
But Aiden's the type of quarterback that makes Devontae more productive.
Yeah.
So just pay attention to that. And then Jacobs, I think, he's going RB10 right now. I think you're fine with that either way. Again, I think a lot of it hinges on is Parham going to improve at left guard because the team refused to move him to right or not. But still, he was very productive. He's still explosive. He's a great running back. Like, I'm fine with that. But for everything else, it just comes down to which quarterback it is, because stylistically, that will change the offense at a level that I don't think people realize yet.
I think Hunter Renfrow is a bit of a snake in the grass here at wide receiver 80.
People just are totally ignoring him.
And I actually think he'll play pretty well with either quarterback because lots of those routes that Jimmy does throw, those are Renfrow routes.
Yeah.
And I think Renfrow is going to remind Aiden O'Connell, if he's the player, a little bit of Charlie Jones in the short to medium area.
Yeah. I mean, Charlie had more gas.
That's
but,
right. Down the field, he's going to be looking at Devontae. But in those short to medium areas, Charlie Jones, his childhood friend and teammate from high school that he ended up playing his last year at Purdue with as well, ran a lot of that short to intermediate stuff. And that's where Renfrow absolutely eats out of the slot. So I think Aiden's going to, look at Renfrow and go, oh, it's 2/3 of Charlie's game. I'm used to that already. If I'm going deeper, I'm going to, bomb it out to Devontae because, as he said to us, I wasn't supposed to be here in the first place. I was a walk-on. I got nothing to lose. And he's carried that mentality forward. I don't see that he'll, end that anytime soon with the Raiders. If he makes it on the field for the Raiders, he's not going to play scared and he'll let it go. But Renfro's one of those guys, wide receiver 80, and he works with either quarterback. So he's a bit of insulation against that quarterback uncertainty, of which there is plenty. And it is probably the first time on Bootleg Football that we've told you to take a look at people's feet.
Unfortunately. By the way, Austin Hooper, and this is another one that kind of fascinates me. Austin Hooper ADP is undrafted, essentially. It's tight end 51.
Yeah.
Michael Mayer, who we love. We love Michael Mayer. But he's a rookie tight end in a very complicated offense.
Yep.
Historically, those don't produce a lot.
Nope.
He would be the exception, not the rule, if that happened. But Michael Mayer is going as like TE24, something like that. And Hooper's the starter. So
yes, in a system that prefers veterans.
Oh, absolutely, because every single concept in this offense has permutations on permutations on permutations. And also there's a lot of like one-word concepts. Like their no huddle stuff is fascinating because literally it's entire play concepts that are one-word calls, and they're running down the field just shouting single words, and then depending on the personnel group that's on the field, like you got to know what your role is,
means,
and it's a very multifaceted offense, and they have answers for everything, but those answers take a while to learn, and for a rookie that is exploring Las Vegas for the first time and they're like 22 years old and they have no idea what they're doing and they're just starting their professional career and they're young and they're inexperienced, it's not a friendly offense for them. Like even Gronk, when he came up in this offense, took until year 2 to be Gronk.
Yeah.
And he's maybe the best tight end ever. So yeah, I don't know. I'd rather get Austin Hooper in the very last round than Michael Mayer, even though I think Michael Mayer will be a better player over the long term. For this year, I don't care about that.
Yeah, Dynasty's one thing, right?
Yeah.
If it's a dynasty play, sure, go for Michael Mayer. If it's what are they going to produce for me in 2023, I don't know that either one is a great bet, again, with the quarterback uncertainty, but Hooper is certainly the greater value.
By the way, if you also want to go at best ball with us this year, whether it's Best Ball Mania 4 or any of the other little best ball contests that Underdog runs, I mean, Best Ball Mania has like 15 million in prizes, but there's also all the other side contests that are millions more in prizes. There's there's a lot over on Underdog. Not to mention the season long where you kind of like pick higher or lower on not just rookies, but any player you can think of. They're going to have yardage totals, touchdown totals that you can go higher or lower on. There's pick'ems during the season. There's so much. And that's just for football. There's also basketball, there's baseball, there's esports, there's golf, like whatever, right?
Golf.
So you can use promo code Bootleg. They'll match your deposit up to $100, and you can use that on anything on the site. They just give you an extra $100 for free to use, or really whatever you deposit up to that $100, they'll double it for you. So Underdog makes this whole show possible. Yes. They are funding us for the next 2 years. They are an incredible partner that I still cannot believe we landed.
Yes.
And it would mean a lot to us if you guys support our sponsors so that they keep supporting us if you happen to like the show. Again, promo code Bootleg. With that, EJ, let's get to free agency. Again, there was a changing of the guard, so to speak. A lot of veterans that are no longer there, some more important than others. There were a lot of moves that I disagreed with here, but at the same time, they felt somewhat inevitable.
So a lot of guys that moved on, period. This is one of the larger lists in terms of amount of players from one team that are not back with that team for the following year. And you start scrolling through it and you're like, oh, yeah, no problem. And you start to think about 2/3 of the way down, oh, they didn't really let go like a lot of guys of value or a lot of guys that played a lot of snaps. And then you get to the bottom 2/3 of the list and you're like, okay, Deron Harmon, the safety, 95.7% of the snaps. Clelin Ferrell, and you can say what you want about Clelin Ferrell. He was drafted by the previous regime. He's never played up to expectations, but he's still in their rotation played 43, almost 44% of their snaps, which for an edge player is pretty darn good. Andrew Billings, the run stopper from the middle that moved on to the Bears, he played 42% of their snaps. Again, as a nose tackle, that's a pretty high percentage. Sidney Jones, the corner, he only played 9.7% of the snaps. That was injuries, but he moves on with a pretty decent contract to the Bengals. Then we get into the solid bottom third of the list where I was basically highlighting every player. Mac Hollins, 93.5% of the snaps, was incredibly productive for them. Moves on to the Falcons.
Mac Hollins, man.
As an original OG Mac Hollins stan from his time at UNC, I'm with you. Darren Waller, the aforementioned Darren Waller, your jersey, goes on to the Giants. Rock Ya-Sin, who played almost 60% of the snaps, ends up with the Ravens, which I actually think is a really good fit for him. Foster Moreau goes on to the Saints. Derek Carr, also to the Saints, we've talked about. And then Denzel Perryman, linebacker for the Raiders, ends up with the Texans, and he played 50% of their snaps as what I would call a true middle linebacker. So when you get to the bottom, there's a lot of impact, a lot of snaps they lost, a lot of experience, a lot of folks that have been with the Raiders a long time. So the list kind of starts off with a lot of like also-rans, and then you get to the bottom and you go, ooh, that's a pretty big core out of the middle of that team.
And this is very much, I think, the current brass trying to remake the roster in their image, which is their right to do. It's their team, right?
It's also a very natural progression in the NFL.
If it's their job on the line, they're going to make the roster however they see fit. But at the same time, it's a lot of guys to replace, a lot of snaps to replace.
A lot of snaps.
Not all of them were great players, but you still got to fill snaps somehow, right? Yeah. And I think that it's tougher than people think as a GM to replace that many guys who are down eaters like that. In terms of who they did re-sign, again, Alex Bars, Bears legend.
There's a couple of Bears legends on here. Actually, 3 Bears legends they re-signed.
Who's the...
see if you can find him.
Hold on. Jesper Horsted?
Yes.
And...
right below Bars.
Oh, Ranas Grasu.
Yeah,
he's still kicking around. Look at him go.
Still kicking around.
Wow.
So, again, not guys that made huge differences for the Bears, although I think Horsted could have given the chance. They were all backups for the Bears, but they all ended up in that sort of, it was the pipeline before the Falcons, right? Before all the former Bears went to the Falcons last year, they went to the Raiders.
Also brought back Keelan Cole to be like wide receiver 5 or whatever for them. Amir Abdullah. Great pass protector, special teamer. Man, if you play special teams, you can pass protect, you're going to have a long career in the NFL. So shout out to Amir Abdullah playing for, I think, close to 10 years now with probably like less than 4,000 career yards. Like,
yeah, it feels like it.
That's awesome. That's great for him. Love that. Jermaine Illuminor also brought back to be their starting right tackle this year, presumably. I think it's either him or Brandon Parker, if I recall correctly. Jared Tillery. Is he IDL or edge for them? I know he's always kind of floated in between.
It's funny you ask because he feels very much like a 4-eye to me.
But like not a good one.
No, again, not a player. There's a lot of players on here that feel like down eaters. We talked about how many down eaters they just lost, but there's a lot on the re-sign list that feel like, yeah, they're not starters for us outside of Illuminor for the most part. But they're going to be guys that play on special teams. They're going to be guys that play down in the wide receiver rotation. They're going to be backups, rotational guys.
Jakob Johnson.
Yeah.
They love their fullback.
Yes.
And Jakob, he knows the offense really well because it's McDaniels and he spent time in New England. So, they're actually one of the few teams that uses fullbacks more than like 10% of the time.
Yeah.
We love it when fullbacks get jobs. That's great. In terms of third-party additions, we touched on the Jimmy Garoppolo situationship. Jaquan Johnson, they brought over. DeAndre Carter, they brought in from the Chargers as well. Brandon Faison, they brought in from the Colts. Marcus Epps, who's a safety I really like. They got him from the Eagles. Huge hitter, just absolutely blows people up. Jacoby Myers, because Josh McDaniels, if he's going to go down with the ship, it's going to be with his guys, and Jacoby's one of them. Let's see, Austin Hooper, we mentioned him. He's going to be the starting tight end for them, likely. Philip Dorsett, also a veteran receiver that knows the offense. O.J. Howard, still kicking around. I still believe, EJ.
I would love to. I really thought his shot was with the Bills. When that didn't happen, I think the shine went off.
I know.
Third or fourth team, and I was like, this is the one. And I'm not ready to say this is the one anymore, but they added another Bears legend, Duke Shelley.
That's right. Duke Shelley's there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, Robert Spillane. I forgot they grabbed him too to add linebacker depth. I don't know if he's going to start for them, but as like a third linebacker
to right now.
Not bad.
No, he actually is. He's penciled in as their starting.
Him and Diablo, right?
He's their weak side, and Diablo they have playing the middle. Divine Diablo, that is a move I love. He's wearing the dot.
Have you seen how big he is?
Yes.
Now? He's like 240.
He's rocked up.
He's huge.
And this is a trend. I mean, if you look around the league, we see a lot of these players who were former safeties, college safeties, who moved to linebacker either their last year in college or when they got converted and moved to the pros. Jermaine Pratt was one. This is a transition that a lot of defensive coordinators, Patrick Graham not excluded, really like. Guys that can run, guys that have played the pass pretty extensively at the third level, moving to the second level, bulking up. In this case, I love this because I was really excited when they drafted Divine Diablo, liked him as a player, thought of him more as a dime backer, which is a heavy third safety. They've gone all the way. They've just shoved him in and said, you are the middle linebacker wearing the dot, calling the defense. I'm here for it. I liked him as a player. I can't wait to see if he follows the path of players like Jermaine Pratt, who've seen a ton of success in this league.
He's like 20, 25 pounds heavier than Shaq Leonard. He's fucking huge now.
And he's tall.
He's so
tall.
So, he's awesome. I love him. He's great. All right, that brings us to the draft. No like headliners in free agency, just kind of filling in here and there. Like Jimmy was the most expensive piece, but even then Jimmy's contract is written in a way where it's kind of like, I don't know. Maybe
it is now.
Yeah, it is now on take two. But with the draft, here's really where they did add significant headlining talent that you and I both loved. And I think that they were lucky with a capital L to get Tyree Wilson at 7th overall.
Yeah, this is in stark contrast to everything we said that was kind of up and down and mixed about free agency. We feel really strongly about this draft class. This is a very good draft class, and it's in a lot of contrast to the previous regime, whose draft classes we were like, I don't know about that. When we start this with round 1, pick 7, they get Tyree Wilson, the edge you mentioned out of Texas Tech, who is massive and has, I don't want to say unlimited, but very high physical potential. In terms of his ceiling, he can do things that a lot of other players can't do because he's so damn big. He is tall. He has long arms. He can bend. I am super duper duper high on Tyree Wilson. Had a foot injury. It's probably why he was there at 7. You don't like to see guys that big with foot injuries, but I hope it heals up because if he is a healthy player for them, he will be an impact rusher. I just don't see any way that doesn't work out other than can't get healthy. But he was pretty healthy in college. Some teams had no flag on him medically. Some teams had a kind of caution, and some teams probably had him red flagged. What didn't seem terribly serious, I don't know anybody that had them off the board, but
no. I think it was more. It's not doctors say don't draft him, or doctors say like, do you have anybody who's the same grade?
yeah,
Like, I think that was honestly the conversation that was happening in the Seahawks.
Yes.
We know the Seahawks loved him. But, if Witherspoon was the same grade and was clean medically, like, yeah, they're going to take Witherspoon.
Round 2, pick 35. They go and get tight end Michael Mayer from Notre Dame. Great, very experienced starter who, again, if you're picking a dynasty tight end, he's going to be a very good player. I think he is a great two-way tight end, which is rare. He has more receiving chops than people give him credit for because people say, oh, he's big and he's in line and he can block. He's a very effective receiver as well if you look at his numbers. So I think a good pick, but rookie tight ends don't come right out of the gate. They just don't. It doesn't matter who you are. So it's going to take a year or two. Have some patience. This is a good player and it's a terrific pick. Round 3, pick 70. They get Byron Young, the Alabama Byron Young, not the Tennessee Byron Young, who is really more of a 5, can move into a 3. Big defensive lineman who I liked and I think will be a very solid part of their rotation. Also in round 3, down to pick 100, they get Trey Tucker from Cincinnati, which I thought was interesting that Trey Tucker went before his running mate at Cincinnati, who ended up going to the Bears.
He's fast.
They're both fast. It was 2 burners, but I really thought his teammate might go before him. Turns out Trey Tucker gets drafted first, and come on, Raiders pick a fast wide receiver.
I know. What year is it?
News at 11. Come on, we've seen this one before. Round 4, one of my favorite picks of the draft for them. Pick 104, only 4 picks after Trey Tucker. Jacorian Bennett from Maryland, who is a feisty and rocked up little nickel who gives up very, very little. Will support the run, is almost hyper aggressive, and he's going to have to tone that down a little bit because when you miss at nickel, you leave yourself a gap. But I like him as a player a lot. I think he fits with Patrick Graham's mentality of aggression going forward. I like Jacorian Bennett quite a bit. Round 4, pick 135. We've talked a lot about Aiden O'Connell. We love him, quarterback from Purdue. I think he can develop into something. I don't want him being my starter right off. I just don't.
I see so much Kirk Cousins in him, and I mean that in a good way.
No, I agree.
I mean, Kirk's been a starter for a long time, like one of the better 4th-round quarterbacks ever, like in the history of the league. To be a decade-long starter, like that's an amazing career for Kirk Cousins. I don't think anybody can ever argue he's anything other than a good pick. Say what you want about him. I think Aiden O'Connell's very similar. Like in a lot of ways, and I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. And like I was talking to Eric, who recruited him to the Shrine Bowl and gave us the opportunity to sit down and watch film with Aiden and kind of pick his brain. And like I was like, are you hearing the same things out of there that I am of like how much they love him? And he's like, oh my God, you have no idea. Like, they are obsessed with Aiden O'Connell. And if Jimmy can't go, they think they're fine. And that's pretty high praise for a rookie, let alone a 4th-round rookie.
Yeah, this is going to sound strange because I just said I don't want him as the starter. If he ends up being the starter, I think from my perspective, it's actually going to be more entertaining. From the Raiders' perspective, I don't know that they're necessarily better off. And they're certainly not better off this year because rookie quarterbacks, no matter how highly they're drafted, struggle. So if Aiden O'Connell is your starter, it might be good long-term if he follows Kirk Cousins' career path. I think it could be. There are a lot of similarities to the way they came up, the way they play the game. It's not going to be good news for the Raiders this year. It's going to be good news for us because we're going to get to watch him develop. And I think he will. If you're a Raiders fan for 2023, it's not the best news.
I find their whole rookie draft class fascinating because it's a mix of guys that are going to contribute right away.
Yep.
And also guys that I think are like down the line picks. Like Michael Mayer's a down the line pick.
Yeah.
Tyree, if he's healthy, is a right now pick.
Yes.
Like him and Max and Chandler together. Oh my God. Aiden might be both.
Yeah.
We'll see. And Christopher Smith from Georgia, the safety out of Georgia. Why the fuck was he there in the 5th round? Like, I was stunned by that.
He feels like a right now pick to me because
absolutely,
he has a role they can slot him into right now. And it's honestly the one they sort of drafted Divine Diablo for.
Yeah.
Right? Which is this big, heavy dime backer hitter going forward. In that role, Christopher Smith, if you just basically set him back as the mid safety and tell him go hunt, that was what he was doing in college. He's going to be great at that role. Round 6, pick 203, they get Amari Burney out of Florida, linebacker. It's round 6. His chance is going to be on special teams as a deep backup, sort of 3rd rounder if he makes the squad. I don't really care. It's the 6th round. That's fine. And round 7, pick 231. I like this pick.
I love it.
Nesta Jade Silvera, Arizona State, by way of Miami, big, powerful, inside defensive lineman who I thought had better tape, way better tape in the 7th round. Again, don't know if there was injury off the field. Don't know anything about that, but just throw on the tape, especially from Miami, there were enough flashes that he was better than a 7th round player. Again, it's some positional value or degradation. Look, he plays nose or 1, I thought this was a sneaky, kind of went off for grad year at Arizona State. Maybe people kind of forgot about him as he, left a bit of the spotlight.
He's a ball of butcher knives, man.
I like him.
He's good.
Yeah.
He's really good. He's stout.
Very stout.
He's nimble, like more nimble than he should be for his frame. Like he's round, but not.
Yes, he is.
Not like out of shape. He's just.
He's
round.
a big guy that can really
big.
move. He is explosive with his hands. He can both hold the point of attack if he needs to, or move a single blocker out of the way. I really thought he was better than a 7th round player, so that felt like a great steal to me. Overall, top to bottom, that's a ton of value. It's a great draft class by the Raiders.
I think that they're getting 4 starters and 6 contributors total. Like
at best case, ideally Tyree starts. Michael Mayer starts in 2 tight end sets to start because Hooper will be the starter right off. Byron Young's rotational guy, but
eventually
he's
be.
He's going to play a lot. Yeah. Trey Tucker probably doesn't start with Jacoby and Devontae.
I don't think Trey would ever start, but he'd be like the number 4 they bring in to
for 4 verts.
It's like, hey, you get 2 catches today, but they're both going to be huge.
Yep.
Like that's
go run a safety off.
Thing.
That's your job. Jacorian could eventually start again. I don't think he starts in year 1. Nickel is, he has a potential to do that, but Nickel is a, historically difficult role, especially for rookies. We talked about Aiden. He could start. If Jimmy's foot doesn't pencil, he's going to start.
Chris Smith is your 3rd safety. If you're coming out in a 3 safety nickel,
Or, heavy dime, Chris Smith's a shoe-in.
It's a lot of guys.
If you're getting down to the 5th round and you're saying that guy has a starting role as a package player, that's still great.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenal class, which is what gave me like a little bit more hope about what this front office is doing, because clearly March was panicky, but April they were cool as a cucumber and they nailed it. So we'll see. I'm willing to give them another year and just see where it goes. In terms of their UDFA haul, McLennan Curtis from UT Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Love that pickup for them. Just keep stacking interior guys till you find a combo that works. I'm all for it. Drake Thomas from NC State. That was one of the pickups of all pickups for any UDFA haul. He's an amazing player. And there was a lot of linebackers that are not as good as Drake Thomas that got drafted. I don't know why he didn't even get like a 7th round pick thrown at him. Like, I get it, the size, but when you look at the instincts, the closing speed, the tackling ability, like what am I missing here? How is that not a draftable linebacker?
He is absolutely every bit a draftable linebacker. Drake Thomas, if you watched our pre-draft coverage, is my boy. I love Drake Thomas. He is amazing. He's a little short and he's a little slow. And if you let that define him as a player, as opposed to all the production he had in the ACC, he was ACC Defensive Player of the Year.
I wouldn't even say slow. It's more so his speed is in a shorter area.
Yeah.
And he's not somebody who's like, okay, go run 30 yards sideline to sideline to track down friggin' Debo or whatever.
He's very quick. He's got good burst. His long speed's not great, which means that 40 time doesn't look tremendous. He's a little bit short, but he is incredibly stout, really well built. We got to see him up close at the Shrine Bowl, 4 days of practice.
So yoked.
Yeah, super yoked, really instinctive, a tremendous blitzer, probably the second best blitzer in this class by number and production behind Ivan Pace Jr. And
Who
if you
also went undrafted somehow.
Yeah, and if you look at him, you wouldn't say that, but he absolutely is. He has a great sense of timing, especially on delayed blitzes. Really impactful player. Him alone would have made this UDFA class. McClendon Curtis is just a big, powerful ball of clay out of Chattanooga, who I think has a future as an NFL guard, like as a starting NFL guard. It's going to take a minute.
They'll both make the roster to me.
To me,
I believe it.
That is exactly what UDFA is for. Can't believe Drake Thomas didn't get drafted. I can't wait to see what he does with the Raiders. Patrick Graham is going to love him. He's going to say the same thing. He gets that guy in the huddle. He sees how smart he is, how quick he is at diagnosing things, how tenacious. Just a bulldog as a player. Love, love, love Drake Thomas.
Before we move on, gun to your head.
Gun to my head. Let's not do that, but okay.
As prospects,
Yeah.
Jack Sanborn, Drake Thomas.
Drake Thomas.
Wow, was that quick for you?
Yeah. And I like Jack Sanborn.
Ooh, it's tough
but
for
you
me.
were higher on Sanborn than I was.
love Sanborn.
I liked him. You loved him. Drake Thomas, I'm flipped. I love Drake Thomas. I liked him better overall as a player than his running mate, who got way more attention, Isaiah Moore.
Where'd Moore end up going up? I can't remember.
He's UDFA too.
They both went undrafted? Okay. Why?
Isaiah Moore, to me, was, no pun intended, more limited, right? He was a smacker. He's an absolute, what I'll call, cone player from the linebacker position, which is a lot like, strangely enough, a guy that just left the Raiders, Denzel Perryman, right? Denzel Perryman coming out in college was a cone player. He was a smack run in the box, what we would call a 2-down thumper. And Isaiah Moore was that. He was the hitter from this class. I thought Drake Thomas had more range, more production, more versatility. He doesn't have more size, doesn't have more speed, but as a football player, I thought he was better.
You know where he went?
I did, because I put him on the list, but I don't remember.
Kansas City.
Yeah. He's the next Nick Bolton.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I thought when I put him on the list. I was like, oh, he's the next.
That means
Nick
we'll be talking about him in a couple days.
Yep.
I didn't know he went to KC. Oh, that's so good for them.
Yeah. As I read through the UDFA list, I was like, oh, well, that's Nick Bolton too.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. The AFC West UDFA halls have not disappointed so far.
Nope.
That brings us to the report card. This is where we give an up, even, or downgrade to 4 categories: front office, coaching, offense, and defense. Offense and defense referring to more of the talent than the coaching side. Front office, it's tough for me because I loved April, but I
want to give one
didn't
up and
like
one
March.
down, which normally would even out to a neutral, but it is so important for me in this league to build through the draft. You have to do it. You cannot build an entire team out of free agency. You'll run out of money. You have to draft well if you're going to be competitive. Last 2 years, they've drafted pretty well. They've built a strong base. They've screwed it up in free agency, which is that piece of you saying I loved 1 month and hated the other. It's hard for me not to give them an upgrade because drafting was such an Achilles heel for the previous administration that they replaced, and they've done well in the 2 drafts they've had. I feel like I have to give them an up for that.
If they can just figure out the March part of the equation, they're going to be a powerhouse. Yeah. And again, I don't want to cast blame on Ziegler or McDaniels definitively because I don't know who was responsible for the Carr
The
thing.
conundrum.
Like the way it went down. Because if they went back, they would not have handled it that way, and Carr might still be the starter.
Possibly.
I think they truly believed that they were getting Tom.
Yeah.
And we've heard from several people at this point that they believed they were getting Tom, and then they weren't, and then they panicked. I don't know where it started. I don't know where it came from. That whole
Who's
plan.
responsible for this?
But it was somebody's fault.
It is somebody's fault.
Somebody's fault.
We'll give them a sort of tepid up arrow. They do need to get the quarterback situation figured out. Free agency in general was okay. The draft has been strong. Normally that would feel like it would even out to a neutral, but I'm going to give them a little bit extra for the draft because they've done well twice in a row. That is going to build a base that the Raiders really haven't had or didn't have through the previous regime because they wasted so many draft picks.
Coaching, we're going to go even,
Yep.
mainly because it's all
The same.
carryover, and
Yep.
we'll see. hopefully this year ends better than last year for them. Offense, again, say what you want to say about Carr. He was their best option at quarterback.
Yes.
And they got nothing for him. And it was a messy breakup that they did not benefit from whatsoever. Not to mention Darren Waller. Again, say what you want about Waller and his durability issues. He's a dynamic weapon that is no longer there. They have done well to add to this offense in multiple ways, but in the absence of having a true solidified answer at quarterback right now, and without Waller there, we got to go slightly down at least. I'm not saying it's like a full 90-degree down, but we'll go slightly down for offensive personnel. And then defensive personnel, I would argue that's up. Now, a lot of that hinges on, is Tyree Wilson healthy? Is Byron Young contributing early like we think he will? But I think the potential of their talent additions here is worthy of an up. What say you?
You put me on the spot earlier. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Jacoby Myers.
Yeah.
At $11 million.
Okay.
Or Mac Hollins at 2.5.
Considering the dollar value, Mac Hollins at 2.5.
Okay. Take the dollars out. Jacoby Myers or Mac Hollins straight up.
Different roles though.
I'm just saying, if you have one wide receiver spot and you get to fill it with Jacoby Myers or Mac Hollins.
Because of what Mac gives me in the run game as well. Oh, God. No, because Jacoby's a better pure receiver. Fuck.
Barely. He is.
I'll go Jacoby, but like I'm not super enthusiastic
I'll ask
about
you
it.
again tomorrow.
Yeah.
For the money, it's not even close for me. I would have stayed with Mac Hollins. I don't feel like Jacoby is a massive upgrade. He is a better pure receiver for sure. But fun question. In terms of offensive talent overall, it is a slight downgrade. There's no Waller. There's no Carr. You don't have a sure answer at quarterback. You kind of fell into Jimmy G as your option, and then that didn't work. Say what you'd like about Aiden. We both like him. We both think he has potential for this year, for 2023. He is not a better option than what they had.
No, I mean, Derek Carr is going to end up as era adjusted, fine. But in terms of raw numbers, he's going to end up as one of the most productive quarterbacks ever. You don't just assume, even as much as we love Aiden, that he's going to be that. I think he can be, but we'll believe it when we see it.
Yeah, so offense going to give it a small tick down. Defense, boy, they got a lot of fun pieces. They have to make them all work together, but the draft brought them a few more. Guys like Divine Diablo that continue to develop from previous drafts and sort of shift roles. I'm excited to watch their defense, which is more than I can say for their offense right now.
In terms of ceiling and floor for wins, and this is an exercise we do for every single team, we don't just do a record prediction because you're not going to be right. We more do, okay, what's the absolute ceiling and what's the absolute floor? Our ceiling is the same. We both went with 9. And maybe that seems a little harsh compared to some of the other ceilings we've thrown out there. But when you consider, again, the lack of clarity at quarterback and the unbelievably brutal schedule this team is playing against, 9 seems fair to me. They're probably not going to make the playoffs. Doesn't mean they're going to be bad. They're going to be in the middle of the league. Like, my floor for them is 7. That's also a higher floor than a lot of teams that we've talked about. So I think projecting them as like the middest of mid teams is fair. And if their quarterback situation somehow is not horrible, maybe I could see an argument for double-digit wins. But I mean, it's not like I'm going to project that now. Like it's so, like I said, it's a mystery wrapped in enigma. Like I don't really know how to approach this team other than saying they're fine.
On vibes alone, I'm going with 9 because even if everything works out on offense, Jimmy's foot is fine. He meshes with Jacoby Myers. Everybody gets a little bit further along. Show me, right? I'm Missouri in this case. Show me Josh McDaniels. Show me a Josh McDaniels head coach team that is just gelled and marched. And they haven't. It doesn't feel at all from the outside. I'll fully admit that we are not in any way inside the loop on this team. From the outside, if you look at a team like Detroit, had a head coaching change probably 3 years ago. How does that team feel about Dan Campbell? That team would run through a wall for Dan Campbell. Vegas Raiders, they had a coaching change a couple of years ago. How do they feel about Josh McDaniels? I don't know.
I mean,
like
clearly
he
and Waller weren't the best of friends.
He hasn't shown anything yet, and this is very much a prove it league. You still have to hold the locker room, and if they don't have Jimmy G, and I don't care who starts at quarterback, if they falter and they start getting blown out in the first part of the year, it is completely possible that McDaniels loses this locker room. Because what do they have to stand on? It's not like, hey, remember when times were tough before and we pulled ourselves up by the bootstraps and won the division? They don't have any of that. There's no proof. Show me. So my floor is 5 because if that happens, they're going to stumble badly. I don't see it bad enough to be like a midseason firing, but I see it as low mid, not bad enough to go get Caleb Williams and turn the franchise around, but that really worst place of like, oh, great, you're picking 8th. Because you won 5 games. That doesn't really help.
If they're a 5 to 6 win team and they have to, I mean, there's very few teams that wouldn't take Caleb at number 1, but let's say one of the teams that already has a top 6 quarterback ends up with the number 1 pick somehow.
Ish. Sure.
And the number 1 pick is for sale. The amount of capital, even from like the 6th pick, that they would have to give up to get Caleb would be unheard of.
I mean, they'd be looking at moving up to number 2 potentially for a guy like Drake May. We've got the whole season to go through. We're not putting out 2024 mocks at this point. It would still be really expensive because there's going to be whoever doesn't get 1 is going to be looking at 2 just like them. It's not just a foregone conclusion that they're at 5 and they can go to 2, you know. For what I'd say is market rate, it's going to be maxed. Whatever people will pay for a quarterback, and teams that don't have a quarterback in this league, aka the Raiders right now, will pay whatever it takes to get one because without one, you're not going anywhere. You're starting off the season looking at winning half your games. That's not what you sell tickets with.
I think it's more likely that Kyler is their starting quarterback in 2024 than Caleb Williams.
Oh, boy.
Just in terms of odds.
Don't put that on me.
Just saying.
I know.
Just saying.
Don't put that on me.
I'm sure some Raiders fans would love to have Kyler as their quarterback. They're staring down the barrel of Jimmy G.
Yes.
So, like, that's an
Neither
upgrade.
one of them's healthy, so if you're just going on player potential at this
hey, if we
point,
add them together, we get 1 functional leg. It's totally fine.
we're getting loopy. We should get out of here.
Yeah, what is it? 11 o'clock at night? Oh, my
yeah.
God. How is it 11 o'clock at
because that's the way it always is at Bootleg After Dark. But we hope you enjoyed it. If we have fired you up about the Raiders' chances, I don't know how we could have done that. But if we did accidentally, or you just want some new Raiders gear, go check out homage.com. They're our official clothing partner. Links down in the description. If you use that, we get a portion of everything you buy on the site. They have a great NFL license, tons of designs, some of the softest shirts and hoodies you'll ever wear. Love, love, love their stuff. Go check out Homage.
We'll be back tomorrow talking Chargers, which I have a very vested interest in that episode. Lots of exciting things going on in Los Angeles, which you see behind us. And we'll be back in, 24 hours or so. We'll see you guys then.